Post. Touch the long, loam, the back heel, that's clever. It's in. They're looking for an offside flag, Jamaica. And they're not going to get one.
Hello, Sunshine. Welcome to the State of the Union, presented by Yerba Madre, the boost you need when you want to win. Drink Yerba Madre, come to life. I'm Alexi Lalas, and this is where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show is live, as it will be throughout the Gold Cup, following each day of action. This show, we review Day 3, which saw Panama for the first time, and we look forward to Day 4 and the action and our good friends from the Great White North, Canada, entering the fray. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this? What are we looking at here? Monday, June 16th in the year 2025. Sorry.
I'm doing well. That goal you saw in the opening there, Oscar Santis, that was goal number 26 in 6 games at this Gold Cup. We're off to a very exciting start. And you were off to a good start, my friend, because I know Santis was your player to watch in that match.
It was, peek behind the curtain, which we like to do here, especially during tournaments where everything's coming fast and furious. It takes a village to make me look halfway presentable and also appear in terms of my knowledge as halfway presentable. And that's why I have good folks like you and so many others making me look good and giving me information. And sometimes it's the best laid plans, right, Mosse? So we have especially at the beginning of a tournament, you have an idea what's going to happen, but you don't know until those lineups come out. And we have wonderful people that are, throwing in information, and then those lineups come out, and then inevitably you will find out that the players that you were going to talk about aren't starting. The person that you were going to identify as your player of the game is not there, and then it's a mad rush to either replace them with somebody. And from a technical perspective, because we like to match it with the visuals of the players, oftentimes they have a list that they give us, and these are the kind of players that we think we are going to get pictures of. Doesn't always work out like that. But yes, I identified him, and it's always nice when that works out actually on the field. We'll talk a whole lot more about that game. Anything before we kick this thing off that you want to mention?
No, let's do it.
Let's do it?
Yeah.
All right, let's light this candle. All right, so Day 3, an interesting day in terms of the teams. And an interesting day in terms of the results. As you mentioned, lots of goals in this tournament so far. My mom was watching today, and my mom loves goals. She will not stand on principle and say, oh, that was a great 0-0 game or anything like that, even if it was a great 0-0 game. She likes goals. She certainly got that in the first game. And although we didn't get goals in the second game, it was one of those games that you say, even though it wasn't high scoring, incredibly entertaining. Panama got the job done against Guadeloupe, ended up 5-2, and then we just came off the air seeing, I guess it can be considered an upset, Guatemala over Jamaica 1-0.
Panama is such an interesting team, runners-up at the last Gold Cup, runners-up in the Nations League this past March. No Carrasquilla, who was the Golden Ball winner at the last Gold Cup. That's a big miss for them. Nevertheless, I thought they looked good. They raced out to a 4-0 lead. Ismael Díaz, who scored 4 goals in the last Gold Cup, got 2 today. They took the foot off the gas after that, but still came out with a 5-2 victory. So I think it's a very solid start for a team that is poised for a deep run this summer.
Yeah, I do. You said they looked good. On paper, obviously, you score 5 goals and you get a win. That's what you want to begin a tournament. But I thought that Panama, yes, they let their foot off the pedal. And even that in and of itself, I think is a problem, although it's kind of a natural reaction for any team. But they were sloppy. And by the way, we're calling it Guadeloupe, 3 syllables, right? Not Guadaloupe. 4
Guadeloupe.
syllables. Guadeloupe, 3 syllables. They provided, I'm talking about Panama, a bunch of opportunities and a bunch of really sloppy play throughout the game. And so if I'm the coach, Christensen, if I'm going back in and watching that, yes, I'm happy that my team won. Yes, I'm happy that I started out the tournament that way. But there was a lot of moments where you're left scratching your head and saying, I hope that this is an anomaly. I hope this was an aberration. I'm not saying that, he reads them the riot act after the game, but they have to improve. And this is a team, as we've said before, that a lot of people are putting in context with the other ones, second, third, certainly third, and a lot of people above the U.S. But you were good with their play today. I think it's going to be fine.
But to your point, it's almost the best case scenario. They get a nice result, but there are things to work on,
Yeah.
so they won't let it get to their head. So it was actually good that it was an imperfect performance to start out.
Now, the games were very, very different, as we talked about in terms of the score. By the way, Diaz's goal, the one that he hit from the top of the box, golfers will often ooh and ah at the perfect shot that they hit, in that it's just effortless, and you know it when you hit it. There's also almost a softness to it. And anybody that's played the game and hit a volley or a half volley usually, and you know it when you hit it true. You know it when you hit it sweet. And he hit it and had wonderful camera work from behind. You were able to see it. If you're watching, you can see some of the highlights for today. It's just it's always satisfying, certainly for the person that's doing it, but it's also satisfying from the outside to see it, because you can imagine that feeling, because it doesn't happen always, but when it happens, you know it. You know it. But also very, very different environments. This first game, Panama against Guadeloupe, was played in the sun and played, let's be honest, in not a very big crowd. As a matter of fact, it was kind of echoing, and it was glaring and jarring, the juxtaposition between the two games. So you kind of have to manufacture your own environment and your own excitement, which I guess Panama ultimately did, but things changed later in the night.
Yeah, both matches were at Dignity Health Sports Park, not far from us, over in Carson, California, home of the LA Galaxy. And yeah, the second match was Jamaica, Guatemala, a rematch of a World Cup qualifier. They played 6 days ago. That Jamaica won 3-0 in Kingston. Both teams did advance to the next round, so they're still in the running for a spot in the 26th World Cup. Also, 2 years ago at the Gold Cup, Jamaica beat Guatemala 1-0 in the quarterfinals, knocked them out. So Guatemala had a score to settle today. They had a lot of support. The Guatemalans really turned out, to your point, and they produced a terrific performance. It's interesting because Jamaica is another one of these teams that's been knocking on the door. They've reached at least the semis in 4 of the last 5 Gold Cups, runners up twice. We keep thinking they might be poised for a breakthrough. And I actually think if you held up Jamaica and Panama squads side by side on paper, Jamaica's has much more pedigree. They would seem to be the team that's right on the cusp of breaking through and perhaps winning tournaments like this. And yet it's actually Panama who are delivering, and Jamaica remained to me a bit of a disappointment. They played poorly today. They lose 1-0. Oscar Santis with the goal that we saw in the opening. So disappointing start for the Reggae boys.
Okay, so let's deal with the Reggae boys, but I don't want to short what Guatemala did, because it deserves time. So we're going to give it time in a second. So let's deal with the Reggae boys and then move them on, and then get to Guatemala. Mauricio Du was on set today, and we were talking about Jamaica, and he seemed to think, at least before the game, that Jamaica is going to be one of those teams that is going to get through. And as you mentioned, the Jamaica brand, if you will, the Reggae boys, a lot of people over the years have fallen in love with it. And what's not to fall in love with? Just, an incredible joy, incredible personality in terms of the team. And yet they haven't quite lived up to it. And certainly, as you mentioned, the talent that they have. And if you're not going to live up to it at this point, when Mexico and the United States and Canada aren't involved in qualifying, then that's a problem. And look, I know that they've had dysfunction behind the scenes, whether it's federation or anything else out there. But let's be honest, show me a team in CONCACAF that hasn't had things happening off the field. You kind of have to get through that. And oftentimes, if not for Andre Blake, they would be in big, big trouble. But this is another worrisome type of performance here. And keep in mind, they beat them 3-0 6 days ago. And Mauricio Du came back to the set after the game, after he called the game. And he said, ask me that question again about whether Jamaica is going to make it to the World Cup.
Yeah, they've got a real Premier League flavor to their squad with guys like Damari Gray, Leon Bailey, Michail Antonio, who we're going to talk about in a minute. They've even got the former England manager, Steve McLaren. And yet it's not really happening for them, which is interesting. But as far as Guatemala goes, that Oscar Santis is a really nice player. He had a hat trick earlier this month against the Dominican Republic in World Cup qualifying. He actually scored one today that got chalked off for offsides, correctly so. But then minutes later, he scores a goal that counted. So yeah, impressive performance by him and for Guatemala overall.
And as you look at these teams, and it was for all of these teams today, there is a undeniable MLS, American professional soccer, or just American soccer in general, lineage. And you look at the players, and time again, whether they're playing now, but many of them before, you just go down the list of players that have had MLS experience, that have at times grown up in the U.S., have gone to American universities, have been in developments for MLS teams or Canadian teams out there. And we were joking that MLS and American soccer in general has helped the entire region at times, kind of sometimes, maybe being the architect of our own demise in terms of it. But this has been good for CONCACAF, the rise of Major League Soccer and the rise of opportunities. And a lot of these teams, some of the experience and the quality and talent that has been able to be cultivated has come through the MLS opportunities that are out there. And Guatemala was no different in terms of the players out there. But I just loved that they fed off of that environment. I loved that you saw a collective feed off of that and not pull back into a bunker type of mentality by any stretch of the imagination, and just enjoy that game and to be rewarded. And when we're talking about next summer, I know there's a lot of people that talk about crowds and what's it going to be like, and are people going to be able to get to the games, and whether they're coming from outside or people within. As we know, our country, maybe more so than any country out there, has multiple audiences, and it would be wonderful to see someone like Guatemala rise up and for the first time get to go to a World Cup. And I mentioned today on air that a few World Cups back, when Panama went for the first time, and you saw that moment before that first game, before a ball was even kicked, and they went down the line, and just tears streaming down the face of the players and the Panamanian fans that had traveled to see the team. That's the kind of stuff I'm sure Johnny Infantino wants to have happen, and then also the stuff that's going to happen on the field. But just that type of experience, I want to see as many of those as possible because of this expanded World Cup.
I mentioned Michail Antonio. The one positive for Jamaica today was seeing him get on the field, which does take us to our boost of the game.
Yes, time now for the boost of the game presented by Yerba Madre. Yerba Madre, the boost you need when you want to win. Drink Yerba Madre. Come to life.
So if you watched our pregame show today, we ran a feature chronicling, obviously, the terrible story with Michail Antonio. Last December, he was involved in a very serious car accident, life-threatening. A lot of people thought his career was over. At the very least, it looked like it was going to be a year before he could even think about playing again.
Broke his leg in 4 places.
Yeah, and he's way ahead of schedule, and he made the Jamaica Gold Cup squad. Even then, a lot of people thought it was just so he could train with them, but realistically, he wasn't going to play in this tournament. I know when you included him in your list of 10 best players at the Gold Cup, some people on social media wondered, why are you including a guy who's probably not even going to play in this tournament? Lo and behold, their first match, they need a spark, and who do they bring off the bench? And I actually thought he looked okay for a guy who hadn't played in.
Absolutely. I mean, he did change the game when he came in, and when you see someone, you're like, all right, is there a hitch in his step? Is it different? I couldn't tell in that moment. Again, it was a 10-minute spell, but just a wonderful moment despite the actual result. And in that moment that they turned to him when they needed something and they needed a spark and obviously needed a goal. Ultimately, they didn't get it. I think that says a lot. And if you had watched our feature before the game that told the story, I mean, they showed the car and it just completely mangled. And so, while it was a horrible accident, it could have been even worse. But I think it shows the spirit and the commitment and dedication and the personality that he has to work so hard to get back and to provide inspiration for that team. So it'll be interesting as they go on. Now, having lost the first game where they need something, is he okay to start? I don't know. We'll see going forward. But he is definitely someone that the story's great. But from a practical perspective, they need players like him on the field because, again, it's just not clicking for this Jamaica team. And I know, like we just talked about, we expect much more from them.
Now, yesterday, we know the U.S. had an impressive opening win over Trinidad and Tobago 5-0. We talked about it on last night's pod, but you've now had another day to reflect. We spent most of last night's pod talking about Luna and Tillman, and they were the stars of the show, but other players shined as well. One guy I neglected to mention was Sebastian Berhalter. I thought he had a very good game in the midfield. That pairing with him and De La Torre impressed me. Did it for you as well?
I think Sebastian Berhalter, when he has a good game, obviously anybody who scores, that's going to highlight stuff. But I think that from a consistency base, because he's not there to be a goal scorer, but the consistency that he has, whether it's for a club team or for the national team, it's where you don't notice him, but he's doing the work behind the scenes. And I think he did a lot of that. And I think, again, having been involved, he having started the last game where they got their ass kicked and him being associated with that, now being associated with this one, I'm sure he much preferred what happened the other day. That was good. But a couple of things that we were talking about and I was thinking about when it came to this team, because we've come on air now day after day after day and kind of talked about this saga of this team and all of the criticism and all of the drama and the dynamic that exists with this team. And I was thinking earlier today about what a tournament is, and the fact that we've said time and time again, Mauricio Pochettino ultimately is going to be judged next summer in the World Cup. We understand that, and this team's going to be judged next summer. But it doesn't mean that we, on the outside, aren't going to look at him and look at this team in the moment and extrapolate it out and use it to read some tea leaves as to where they're going. But a World Cup is obviously a tournament, which means it's kind of a bubble. And sometimes whatever happened before gets completely thrown out. Now, a lot of times it does inform, either directly or indirectly. But one of the things that you have to do in a World Cup is deal with all of the noise. Oftentimes the noise, you make it yourself or others make it for you. And so this type of controversy that's going on now with the team, sometimes we associate it with, I don't know, France at times. You have to be able to either cut out the noise or do something that is going to supersede the noise and make a bigger noise. And that's part of the development of a team. That's part of a development of a coach. And that's part of a development of a player to be able to do that. And what this win did was, at least for a moment, provide them a little respite from us talking constantly about Christian Pulisic and all that was going on there. This was this moment where they could celebrate it. And if you listen to the Mauricio Pochettino and the players after this, there was a sense of relief. I mean, it was palpable. You could see and feel that they were relieved that this happened. And there was a sense of kind of giving themselves license and grace to celebrate it, with the understanding, like we said time and time again, that this was not a great opponent and they still have much bigger fish to fry going forward. But this lesson, who knows? Either individually or collectively, maybe that's carried into the summer, because there might be drama, there might be controversy next summer, and you're still going to have to find a way to do your job on the field. And the best way, like we said, to mitigate it is to do well on the field, which is what they've done.
Now, Tyler Adams sat out with a turf toe, and there's some questions now about when should Pochettino bring him back into the fold, especially in light of what I just said, that Berhalter and De La Torre played very well in the midfield. Our producer, Joel Santos, had an interesting take this morning that I know got you riled up a little bit. He's seen some of these crunching tackles in these games, that serious injury suffered by Madrigal in the Costa Rica-Suriname match. And he's all of a sudden done this 180 on the whole Pulisic thing and said he's right to skip this tournament because it would have been too much of a risk of him getting injured. People are talking about not wanting to risk Tyler Adams. Did you buy this notion that because this is a CONCACAF tournament that there's a greater risk of injury and the U.S. has to be mindful of that?
I don't buy the injury excuse. You might as well just say, look, just put him in bubble wrap and we'll see him in the World Cup. Because you're going to have to do now a hierarchy of what games matter. What games should he play? I mean, the U.S. has, 8 to 10 friendly games here. None of them mean anything, really. And every single one of them presents an opportunity for Christian Pulisic to walk on the field and to get hurt. And so if it's all about keeping him from getting hurt, then he shouldn't play any game. But to put it on the Gold Cup or games against CONCACAF opponents, that there is a higher chance of him getting hurt because of the rough and tumble way that they play. I mean, come on. I just, I I disagree. I understand what he's saying in that we want Christian Pulisic to be healthy, but of course we do. But every single athlete risks injury each and every time he or she walks on the field. By the way, they risk injury each and every time they walk out their door. And if you're just constantly trying to protect them from injury, then they're never, ever going to play a game. And so then you say, all right, well, should a player not play the Euros because it's not the World Cup? And they could get hurt in the Euros, and then maybe it's a really serious injury, and they're not 100% when they get to the World Cup. And I know it's a little apples and oranges when you're talking about the Gold Cup and when you're talking about the Euros. But this is our confederation. And warts and all, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying that relative to a Euros, the Gold Cup stacks up in terms of attention, notoriety, or even competition. But we are part of CONCACAF. If we want to go be part of someplace else, whether it's CONMEBOL or somebody else, fine, we can have that conversation. But if you are a part of the team, because this is a team in terms of all the members, then I think you owe it to your teammates. You owe it to this association that you are part of to be a part of it, whether you're an individual player or a team. So, yeah, it was, but it was a fun discussion. And to see him come around and now, in his mind, what Christian Pulisic is doing is absolutely right. And, again, this is gonna blow over. It's given us plenty to talk about. I just hope this U.S. team on the field continues to, again, shift the narrative by doing good things on the field. And they're going to have their hands full in this next game against Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so next up for the U.S. Thursday in Austin, they will face Saudi Arabia live on FS1. I'm curious to see if Tyler Adams starts that game.
Have you had turf toe before?
I have not. I'm also curious to see what the center back pairing will be. Is he going to rotate throughout this tournament, or is the idea to come out of this tournament with some sense of the starting pairing? I'm pretty sure Chris Richards will be one of them, but I still don't know who that other guy will be next to him.
Well, if, as I suspect, there will be a higher level of competition against Saudi Arabia, and if Pochettino is trying to learn, then I would think that he continues on to see if, I think he understands what Chris Richards is, but if he has some ideas about others, then you want to see them test, especially when it comes to defenders, right? Because you can sometimes go out, like the game the other day, and as a defender, and you can do it with a smoke and a coffee and just kind of hang out. Or, by the way, as a goalkeeper, I hope that he continues to start. Who started the other day?
Richards and Ream.
No, as a goalkeeper.
Matt Freese.
Freese, exactly. I kept saying Schulte. If he really wants to see what Matt Freese is all about, I think you run him back because he's going to be tested, I would think, more by Saudi Arabia. Who knows? Maybe they rise to the occasion and they go out and win 6-0 against Saudi Arabia.
Now, on the topic of U.S. center backs, do you know today was the 11-year anniversary of the U.S.'s opening win over Ghana in the 2014 World Cup? John
really?
Brooks got the late winner. And Clint Dempsey was doing an interview with Men in Blazers reflecting on the U.S. advancing out of its group in that World Cup. And he credited you for lighting a fire under the team because evidently in the lead up to the World Cup, you had said that they weren't going to make it out of their group.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. What was the group again? Portugal?
It was Germany, Portugal, and Ghana.
And Ghana. That's murderer's row for a U.S. team, even at the time, as good as it was. Yeah, so they did a send-off in New York City, I remember, and we were on stage behind. I think Max Bretos at that point was hosting it, and he asked me point blank, "Do they make it out of the group?" And this was they were the whole team was lined up in front, 1,000 people in front at Times Square, I think we were. And if somebody asked me a question, they're going to get an answer. And so I said no. And so you're welcome, Clint Dempsey. You're welcome, the U.S. men's national team. You're welcome, the United States Soccer Federation. You're welcome, Jurgen Klinsmann, because evidently I am an incredible motivator. And I don't do it for money, Mosse. I do it for my country. Years later, by the way, I remember telling Carly Lloyd to her face, too, that they weren't going to win the World Cup and just seeing the venom in her eyes. And they just went on and won the World Cup. So if you need to be motivated in life, I am your man.
Now, I was in Brazil that summer as a spectator, staying with family, going to a bunch of games. And I still remember um, being at a restaurant in Brasilia where my mother's family lives and watching that Portugal US game where it looked like the US was going to win. They were up 2-1, and then the last kick of the game was it Ronaldo with the
Yeah.
cross, Nani with the header,
Incredible cross. Just you went out
finishes
wide and you
2-2.
thought, oh, this is going to be great. This is great. And you hit this incredible cross.
And at that point, you thought the U.S. might have blown it, but then they got a nice favor from Portugal, who beat Ghana in the last game, and then that meant the U.S. advanced even despite losing to Germany in their last group game.
You know, there's a lot of talk right now because of the whole Christian Pulisic thing about this generational type of thing, and the old guys yelling at the new guys and taking them down, and a lot of people are psychoanalyzing everybody, and I'm like the old guy, multiple generations here. They're saying people are jealous and all that kind of stuff. No, it's just kind of the way of the world. It's the way that it works. And Christian Pulisic and his generation at some point in the future are going to be sitting where I am, hopefully many, many years from now, and they can pry it from my cold, dead hands. But they will be talking about the next generation. And who knows, maybe it's a time where they're praising him, but there's also a time where they're being critical of them. And maybe there's a time where they get asked point blank in Times Square about where the team is going to finish, and they will have to give a truthful answer and an honest answer.
So back to the Gold Cup. Tomorrow, Group B fires up play. That's the only one that hasn't taken the field yet. Doubleheader on FS1. First up, Curacao will face El Salvador in San Jose. And then the nightcap, Canada will take on Honduras in Vancouver. Canada obviously riding a wave of momentum ahead of this tournament. Everybody from Landon Donovan to other pundits have proclaimed them the best team in CONCACAF. Their own players at times have suggested that, like Kyle Larin. But Jesse Marsch and some of the players trying to walk that back a little bit in the press conference ahead of this match. I thought those were some interesting comments. Should we take a listen?
Yes.
Look, there's been talk about some people saying that we have the best team or we are favorites. None of that really matters right now. Right? What matters right now is our focus on this match against Honduras.
So for me, I don't think we come in as favorites. I think to be favorites in a tournament, then you have to be the one that maybe won it the most times. Of course, I know we have a strong team and we can challenge for sure to win it, but to be favorites is something I wouldn't say personally, but I know we can achieve it.
I love that Johnny says, look, how can we be considered the favorites when we haven't won this in 25 years?
Little underdog Canada now. Now, you can't have it both ways, Jesse. Look, as I've said before, I love the fact that Jesse has been big, bold, and arrogant, and now you can't go the opposite way. Now, he's absolutely right that at some point they're going to have to back up the big talk that they have been giving now on a consistent basis. And he's got himself a very, very good team. I think it's completely fair to talk about them as being favorites, and certainly better than this current U.S. team. And you can make an argument of better than Mexico. So I think that they are getting, well, a little worried maybe about the expectations, but they've created this situation, and I'm here for it. I love the fact that Jesse Marsch has made me care and pay attention to Canada. Because when it comes to Canada, let's be honest, it's Canada. They're nice. Nice guys, nice country, but, it's Canada. And Jesse Marsch, in a very short period of time, with the things that he has done and said, has made me pay attention to this country. And they are a very, very good team, and they very well could go on and win this thing. But I think a lot of people are saying, all right, Jesse, slow your roll. Now go out and actually do something. And we'll see if it ultimately happens here. It's a great opportunity for Jesse. Now we see them come into this Gold Cup. We'll see what they look like in the first game tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing this Canada team because, like I said, I actually care about them now.
Be careful what you say about Canada. Director Gabe already in a bad mood because the Padres are losing to the Dodgers tonight, and you don't want to get him further riled up.
So wait, he's a fan of American baseball teams?
Yes, he's Canadian, but he roots for the San Diego Padres.
But I certainly don't know a lot about baseball, but the the country of Canada still has some Major League Baseball teams in it,
Correct.
which would be who? The Toronto something or others?
The
Argonauts?
Toronto
Not
Blue
Argonauts.
Jays. Toronto Blue Jays are his AL team. He informs me. He's got an AL team and an NL
There's two
team.
teams. Oh, Montreal, right? Do they have a Montreal team?
Yeah, he also grew up in San Diego, so he has some affinity with San Diego.
Whatever.
He's an interesting guy. We should grab lunch with him one day, and you can
Okay.
learn all about this.
I like interesting guys.
Now, one guy who's drinking the Jesse Marsch Kool-Aid is producer Sean Sullivan, because right before we started taping, he said Jesse Marsch is the best coach in CONCACAF, and you weren't buying that.
But based on what? It was feel for him that he felt like he has the best team. Well, first off, having a best team means nothing about coaching. You just have the best team. I'm not saying that Jesse Marsch hasn't done a good job, but the best coach, it's kind of like a lifetime of work, right? So, if you want to make that better than Javier Aguirre, I don't know. By the way, Thomas Christensen, I think, is a really good coach. And I think that, if and when he takes this team to Panama team to a World Cup, even if he doesn't, I think that his next move is going to be really interesting, because I think he's going to have a lot of suitors out there. Who else does he have here? Steve McLaren? Jeez.
Can I just say, I find the coaches at this Gold Cup fascinating for good reasons, bad reasons. Some of them, it's the pedigree. Others, it's just the storyline surrounding them. But you've got Aguirre with Mexico, Miguel Herrera with Costa Rica, who's going to coach against Mexico. You've obviously got Jesse Marsch. You've got Dick Advocat with Curacao, a man who coached the Netherlands at the '94 World Cup in the United States, won a UEFA Cup with Zenit. He's got incredible experience. We just talked about Thomas Christensen. You've got Steve McLaren, former England boss, coaching Jamaica. You've got Luis Fernando Tena coaching Guatemala, a guy that won an Olympic gold medal with Mexico. You've got Dwight York, the legend, coaching Trinidad and Tobago. Mauricio Pochettino coaching the U.S. I probably left out a couple of other ones. So a lot of interesting coaches at this Gold Cup.
Yeah. Who did you mention that's the coach with the neck? It was that Michail Herrera. I always forget his name. But I don't forget the neck, and I don't forget he got to fight the airport.
And how
a couple
could I
years
forget?
ago.
I buried the lead here. Hervé Renard.
Oh, Hervé. Nobody wears a white shirt like him. Definitely 2, possibly 3 buttons down. Love him. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of interesting coaches on the managers, whatever you want to call them, on the sideline. But if I had to do like a power rankings of coaches so far, wow. I think the U.S., it's just one game. I won't do that. I won't do that yet. Anything else, Mosse, before we go?
Can I just say, it seems like it's all Sean Sullivan this summer so far. Is Kyla Morris pulling a Christian Pulisic? She's resting this summer, so she'll be fit for the World Cup.
If you go by what our producer Joel says, we've just put her in some very, very protective gear to get her ready for next summer, because that's where a star like her is going to shine. So I think it's a good thing. Listen, we have a wonderful time doing this. Anything, by the way, before we go?
I had a Club World Cup spiel, but I'm going to save it for tomorrow night.
You don't want to do it here? That's okay. That's right. That's a good tease. Was it good or okay?
I'm just, the discourse around this tournament, no one game is a referendum on whether this league is better than that league, or this region is better than that one, or Europe versus the rest of the world. And yet people can't resist attaching these big takes to every result. Palmeiras outplayed Porto in the game, and every other post in my timeline was some Brazilian talking about how this shows the Brazilian league is better than the Portuguese league, and if you put Porto and Benfica in the Brazilian league, they would struggle. Then later on in the day, Botafogo played Seattle. Botafogo were winning 2-0 in the first half. Your old friend TAC Manager was tweeting up a story about how this shows that MLS is a joke, and then Seattle outplays Botafogo in the second half. So Hercules Gomez couldn't resist going back at TAC Manager. And well, no, this proves that Brazil isn't all that. And just the back and forth. It's, you have to, with these things, you need a sample size. You need a few years, several editions of this tournament to see the trends, the patterns. That's how you draw intelligent conclusions about.
Well, okay, that's your first mistake, is expecting anything intelligent to come out of this. But I am going to absolutely side on the people that are drawing conclusions here. That's the whole purpose of a tournament like this. It is the club World
I agree,
Cup.
but don't.
The whole point is to get these clubs that don't play against each other in a scenario like this, because inevitably we have the conversation after a Euros, or a Copa Lib or something like that. Yeah, but when we talk about it on the State of the Union
But
all the time.
let's have a few editions of the tournament and then see the trends, and then you have enough of a sample size. Rory Smith wrote a great piece about this, how every season in the Champions League, invariably there's one league that does well, another one that doesn't, and then people say, well, that's proof this league's overrated, that league's great. And then fast forward to the next season, the league that did well struggles, the other one does well, and then the narrative changes.
So when
from
am I
year to year.
allowed to have an opinion on this, Mosse? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years?
Yeah, somewhere around 3 or 4 years, I think, is enough of a sample size.
No. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right now. And everybody else out there that's doing it, you absolutely should. That's what this was created to do. It's a referendum on whatever team or whatever league, whatever country that you have. So sing while you're winning. And if you lose, then you can poo-poo it. It's kind of like the FIFA rankings.
Chelsea did beat LAFC today in front of dozens of fans.
Yeah, all 3 MLS teams now have played. I think they acquitted themselves well, but moral victories, nobody really cares about that. And there's no actual victories either. Miami was the closest with a 0-0 score line. Other 2 teams lost, and we knew they were going to be up against it, but we'll see what's going on. So maybe I'm not allowed to use that as a referendum for what MLS is or isn't, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Well, I'll see you in 10 years, and then I'll be able to have an opinion. All right, listen, thank you so much for tuning in. Presented by Yerba Madre. We appreciate everything that they are doing here for us. Keep downloading and reviewing and subscribing. We are back at it again tomorrow with Gold Cup action. Come on, we'll see what Jesse Marsch has to do on the field. And then we'll talk about it after on the State of the Union. Keep pushing those buttons left, right, up, and down over there on the old social media platforms. Keep in mind it's SOTU with Alexi out there. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow. So enjoy the night. More soccer tomorrow. This summer of soccer continues on with the Gold Cup and Mosse's FIFA Club World Cup, which we're not supposed to use as a referendum on anything. Either way, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.